He called himself a thief and a liar, but what Leonardo Notarbartolo shared shook the world of diamonds forever. This is the story of a heist like no other. $100 million worth of gems vanished from the Antwerp Diamond Center, leaving behind a trail of mystery, betrayal, and unanswered questions. Stay tuned to uncover how the impossible became reality. The story of Leonardo Notarbartolo unfolds like a scene from a Hollywood thriller, with an air of charisma and intrigue that seems almost too cinematic to be true. When he enters the visiting room of a prison in eastern Belgium, it's as though the atmosphere shifts. Trailing behind a guard who appears more like a devoted assistant than a warden, Notarbartolo moves with a quiet confidence. His fellow inmates can't help but glance his way, drawn by his composed demeanor. His faint smile and the subtle crinkle of laugh lines around his piercing blue eyes hint at a man who is unfazed by his surroundings. Though dressed in the standard white prison uniform, he exudes an undeniable Italian charm. The glimpse of a silver Rolex beneath his sleeve and the distinctive soul patch extending like a punctuation mark from his lower lip complete the image of a man who refuses to let circumstances define him. In the winter of 2003, the name Leonardo Notarbartolo became synonymous with one of the most audacious crimes in modern history. Arrested as the alleged mastermind behind a gang of skilled Italian thieves, Notarbartolo was accused of orchestrating a break-in that defied belief. The target was a highly secured vault located 2 stories below the Antwerp Diamond Center, a stronghold believed to be invulnerable to even the most sophisticated criminals. What followed was an astonishing theft of over $100 million in diamonds, gold, jewelry, and other treasures. The security system guarding the vault was considered unbreachable, fortified by an intricate web of 10 distinct protective layers. These included advanced infrared heat sensors, Doppler radar, a magnetic field, seismic detectors, and a lock with an astronomical 100 million possible combinations. Despite these measures, the vault was emptied with a precision that left investigators baffled. The event was heralded as the heist of the century, a crime so meticulously executed that, even today, law enforcement officials struggle to piece together exactly how it was accomplished. The stolen goods vanished without a trace, adding another layer of mystery to the tale. Although no direct evidence tied him to the crime scene, circumstantial clues led to Notarbartolo's conviction and a 10-year prison sentence. Despite his incarceration, he has steadfastly denied any involvement in the heist. For 6 long years, he maintained an enigmatic silence, choosing not to engage with journalists or share his side of the story. His decision to remain tight-lipped only deepened the allure of his narrative, leaving the world to wonder about the truth behind the man who may, or may not, have masterminded the most remarkable diamond theft in history. Until now, Leonardo Notarbartolo has kept his story shrouded in silence, but today he sits across from me at one of the small, playing tables in the visiting room, ready to speak. His reputation precedes him, steeped in whispers of connections to the Sicilian mafia. Authorities in Italy allege ties to the criminal underworld, even suggesting his cousin was being groomed to become the next Capo dei Capi, the supreme leader of the organization. Now, after 6 years of reflection, Notarbartolo seems determined to shed light on the murky truths surrounding his past. He rests his hands deliberately on the table, his demeanor calm but charged with anticipation. "I may be a thief and a liar," he begins, his voice smooth, laced with an Italian accent that softens his French. "But what I am going to tell you is a true story." He begins his tale on the cold, clear evening of February 16, 2003, when the plan that would later be labeled the heist of the century had reached its final stage. The setting, a desolate stretch of the E19 motorway south of Antwerp. Notarbartolo was behind the wheel of a rented Peugeot 307, his eyes fixed on the road as he pushed the car toward Brussels. In the passenger seat, his longtime partner in crime, a jittery man known as Speedy, sat drenched in nervous sweat. They hadn't slept in over 2 days. The silence in the car was thick, broken only by Speedy's restless movements and his occasional glance at the side view mirror. Speedy was on edge, scanning the traffic as if expecting pursuers to materialize at any moment. Notarbartolo knew this behavior all too well. They had been childhood friends and partners for over 3 decades, and while Speedy had proven his loyalty, he also had a reputation for unraveling under pressure. The rest of the crew had argued against including him in this job, branding him a liability, but Notarbartolo had vouched for his friend, insisting he could handle it. And, remarkably, Speedy had. The heist had gone off flawlessly, no alarms, no police, not a single hitch. By the time anyone noticed the vault had been emptied, Monday morning would have arrived, and their team would already be in Italy. The gems were being transported separately by other members of the crew, who planned to regroup near Milan to divide the spoils. All that remained for Notarbartolo and Speedy was a simple task: dispose of the incriminating contents of a garbage bag stashed in the back seat. They were accused of breaching the highly secured vault of the Antwerp Diamond Center, making off with an estimated $100 million in diamonds, gold, and jewelry. Though the stolen treasures were never recovered, what would ultimately lead investigators to their trail was buried in that very bag. Notarbartolo veered off the highway onto a dirt path that cut through a dense forest. The spot he chose was isolated, concealed from the road by thick trees, though the faint beams of passing headlights occasionally filtered through the branches. He instructed Speedy to stay in the car and ventured into the woods to find a suitable spot to burn their evidence. As he explored the area, he passed a rusted, sagging gate that seemed untouched since the war years. The moonlight offered little illumination, but the place seemed abandoned. A shed near a small pond caught his attention. It was secluded enough. Satisfied with his choice, he began to head back toward the car. What greeted him there left him momentarily stunned. Speedy, gripped by panic, had upended the garbage bag. Its contents were scattered across the muddy ground and tangled in the underbrush. Notarbartolo could hardly believe his eyes. Spools of videotape clung to tree branches like bizarre decorations, while crumpled bills in Israeli and Indian currencies fluttered among the debris. A half-eaten salami sandwich lay discarded amidst the chaos. The most damning sight, however, was the glitter of countless tiny diamonds dotting the muddy ground around the car like fallen stars. Notarbartolo's frustration flared. This mess would take hours to clean up, let alone destroy. He began barking orders at Speedy, who was now pacing erratically, his breaths coming fast and shallow, teetering on the edge of a full-blown panic attack. "I think someone's coming," Speedy stammered, his eyes darting nervously toward the shadows. The forest remained eerily quiet, save for the occasional sound of a passing vehicle on the highway and the faint trickle of a stream nearby. Notarbartolo tried to reassure him, but Speedy was beyond reasoning. "Get back in the car," Notarbartolo ordered, his voice firm. Whatever evidence they left behind would remain hidden in the dense undergrowth. They had no time to waste. Their priority now was to leave the area, and fast. The heist was complete. Speedy had discarded the garbage bag filled with incriminating evidence along a desolate stretch of the E19 motorway, north of Brussels. The early morning light cast a cold, indifferent glow on the empty road as the evidence, videotapes, documents, and loose diamonds, lay scattered and abandoned, waiting to be discovered by the wrong set of eyes. Meanwhile, back at the Antwerp Diamond Center, Patrick Pays and Adjem de Bruiker, 2 seasoned investigators, rushed to the scene. The frantic call they had received moments earlier was still fresh in their minds. The unthinkable had happened. The vault, reputedly one of the most secure facilities in the world, had been breached. As they descended into the subterranean chamber, the gravity of the situation became glaringly apparent. The sight before them was both surreal and devastating. The massive, foot-thick steel door of the vault stood ominously ajar. Inside, chaos reigned. More than half of the 189 safe deposit boxes had been forcibly opened, their contents pilfered. The floor was littered with discarded treasures, velvet-lined jewelry cases, wads of cash, and an array of precious items. Pays paused, his foot nudging something hard. He looked down. It was a diamond-encrusted bracelet, glittering in the faint light. The realization struck him: The thieves had stolen so much that they couldn't even carry all of it away. Pays and De Brucker weren't just any detectives. They were the leaders of the Diamond Squad, a highly specialized law enforcement unit unique in its focus. Their domain was the Antwerp Diamond District, a compact, densely packed area spanning just 3 square blocks. But what this district lacked in size, it more than made up for in significance. This glittering hub of commerce saw 80% of the world's rough diamonds pass through its hands. In 2003 alone, official records indicated gem sales worth $3 billion, but the true figure was likely far higher, obscured by a labyrinth of secretive handshake agreements and off-the-books transactions. The district was governed by unwritten rules rooted in trust, tradition, and the close-knit practices of its dominant Jewish and Indian diamantaires. The Diamond District was under constant watch. 63 surveillance cameras monitored its every corner, and round-the-clock police patrols reinforced its defenses. In response to the growing complexity of diamond-related crime, the Belgian government had established the Diamond Squad in 2000, recruiting Pays and De Brucker as its inaugural officers. Both men were well acquainted with the district's unique dynamics, but even they weren't prepared for the scene that unfolded before them. De Brucker immediately contacted headquarters, his voice steady but urgent. He issued a nationwide alert. The Antwerp Diamond Center, the crown jewel of the district's security infrastructure, had been boldly and systematically robbed. Next, he called SecureLink, the company responsible for the vault's state-of-the-art alarm system. "What's the status of the alarm?" he demanded. The operator on the other end seemed puzzled. "Fully functional," came the response. "All signals from the Diamond Center indicate the vault is secure." De Brucker's frustration boiled over. "Then explain to me how I'm standing inside the vault, with the door wide open, surrounded by evidence of a robbery." He ended the call, exchanging a grim look with Pays. The devastation around them was undeniable. The vault had been breached, its legendary security rendered meaningless. The perpetrators had not only outwitted the most advanced defenses, but had done so with a level of precision and daring that defied explanation. This was no ordinary crime. They were dealing with a criminal mastermind, someone who operated in a realm far beyond the capabilities of the average thief. As they surveyed the scene, one thing was clear: this heist would go down in history as one of the boldest, most ingenious acts of theft ever committed. And the Diamond Squad was now faced with the unenviable task of unraveling the mystery left in the wake of these elusive criminals. The aftermath of the Diamond Center robbery revealed a chilling scene of devastation within the vault, but the heist itself had been years in the making. Rewind to the summer of 2001, about 18 months prior to the infamous crime, and you would find Leonardo Notarbartolo sitting in a modest cafe on Hovenierstraat, the bustling heart of Antwerp's Diamond District. The cafe, though cramped and sparsely furnished with a handful of small tables, offered a perfect vantage point from its corner window. From there, Notarbartolo could observe the frenetic rhythm of the world's most lucrative diamond trade. Outside, the street buzzed with activity. Hasidic men in traditional black hats strode purposefully, their satchels securely locked to their wrists. Armored vehicles lined the curbs, engines idling with an air of tension as burly couriers, handguns discreetly holstered, maneuvered small black cases filled with unimaginable wealth. The crowd was as diverse as it was affluent. African traders in bold, brightly colored suits mingled with Indian merchants wearing jewelers' loops casually draped around their necks. Balding Armenian dealers adjusted their reading glasses as they haggled over deals, their voices carrying the cadence of commerce. Billions of dollars worth of diamonds flowed through this district daily, a river of wealth that briefly surfaced in briefcases, coat pockets, and unassuming rolling suitcases, only to vanish each evening into the fortress-like vaults scattered throughout the area. For any ordinary person, this scene represented a staggering concentration of global wealth, a spectacle of commerce and tradition. For a thief like Notarbartolo, however, it was something else entirely, a glittering, tantalizing paradise. In 2000, he had taken his first step into this treasure trove by renting a modest office in the Diamond Center, one of the district's most prominent buildings. Presenting himself as a legitimate gem importer from Turin, Italy, he ingratiated himself with the community. He attended meetings with dealers, purchased small stones with cash, and perfected the guise of an affable businessman with a charming but fractured grasp of French. Beneath this polished facade, however, was one of the most accomplished jewel thieves in the world. By that time, Notar Bartolo had already executed dozens of high-profile robberies. For him, stealing wasn't just a means to an end, it was his raison d'etre. He often reminisced about his very first heist, an event that seemed to set the course of his life. The year was 1958, and he was just 6 years old. Sent by his mother to fetch milk, young Leonardo had returned not with dairy, but with 5,000 lire, about $8 at the time. While the milkman dozed, he had rifled through the man's drawers. His mother, horrified, beat him soundly, but the punishment did little to dissuade him. In fact, it only cemented his conviction: stealing was his destiny. His early years were marked by an almost insatiable curiosity for theft. In elementary school, he pilfered money from his teachers. As a teenager, he graduated to car theft and honed his ability to pick locks with precision. By his 20s, he had elevated his craft to an art form, dedicating himself to studying human behavior. He would trail jewelry salesmen across Italy for weeks, observing their routines and vulnerabilities, storing every detail in his memory. In his 30s, his ambition grew further, leading him to assemble teams of specialists for increasingly daring jobs. This cadre of thieves, many of whom hailed from Turin, became known as the School of Turin, a legendary collective with a range of talents. Among them were experts in lockpicking, alarm systems, safecracking, and even tunneling. One member could scale the sheer exteriors of office buildings like a modern-day Spider-Man. Each heist required a tailored team, with Notar Bartolo at the center, orchestrating every detail. Notar Bartolo's personal skill set was as unique as his charm was disarming. Posing as a jovial jeweler, he effortlessly gained access to places others could only dream of infiltrating. Dealers welcomed him into their offices, workshops, and even secured vault rooms, trusting him as a fellow professional. He would examine merchandise, purchase a few small stones, and leave with their confidence intact. Weeks or months later, under the cover of darkness, he would return, not as a buyer, but as a thief, clearing out their entire stock. To the untrained eye, Notar Bartolo was nothing more than a charismatic entrepreneur. But to those who would later investigate his trail of audacious crimes, he was a master manipulator, a man who could turn trust into vulnerability and opportunity into fortune. His time in the Diamond Center wasn't just preparation, it was an intricate dance, one that would ultimately lead to the most notorious heist of his career. Antwerp was more than just a hub for the global diamond trade, it was a haven for those in the shadows of that glittering industry. For someone like Leonardo Notar Bartolo, it offered not only endless opportunities but also a secure and efficient market for offloading stolen goods. A diamond necklace lifted during a heist in Italy could be dismantled, its individual stones discreetly sold for cash to eager buyers in Antwerp. This city, with its dense network of gem dealers, was the perfect place for a professional thief to operate. Notar Bartolo made frequent trips to Antwerp, typically visiting twice a month. He would stay for a few days in a modest apartment near the Diamond District before returning to his family in the tranquil foothills of the Alps. His life straddled two worlds, the quiet domesticity of a husband and father at home, and the calculated precision of a criminal mastermind when he was away. He was careful and deliberate, dealing only with a select circle of trusted buyers when it came to fencing stolen goods. Trust was paramount in his line of work, and he had spent years cultivating these relationships. One particular day, as he savored his espresso in a bustling cafe on Hovenierstraat, a familiar figure entered. It was a Jewish dealer, one of his most reliable contacts. The man joined him, and after a bit of casual conversation, he leaned in with a proposal. "Actually, I want to discuss something a bit unusual," the dealer said, his tone light but measured. "Maybe we could walk and talk?" Notar Bartolo agreed, and they left the cafe together, stepping away from the bustling heart of the Diamond District. As they reached a quieter area, the dealer's demeanor shifted. The lighthearted pretense was gone, replaced by a seriousness that demanded attention. "I want to hire you for a job," the dealer said bluntly. "A big one." The offer was both intriguing and unexpected. The terms were simple. For an advance payment of 100,000 euros, Notarbartolo was tasked with answering a single question: was it possible to rob the vault of the Antwerp Diamond Center? Notarbartolo's initial instinct was skepticism. As a tenant in the Diamond Center himself, he rented a safe deposit box in the very vault being discussed. To him, it was the epitome of security, the safest location for safeguarding valuables in the city. Still, the sum of 100,000 euros was persuasive. If nothing else, he could take the money, document the vault, and demonstrate to the dealer just how impossible such a heist would be. With this in mind, he set out on a reconnaissance mission, his equipment deceptively simple but ingeniously effective. Nestled in his breast pocket was what appeared to be an ordinary highlighter. However, hidden within the cap was a miniature digital camera capable of capturing 100 high-resolution photographs. In the Diamond District, photography was strictly prohibited, but Notarbartolo's discreet device drew no attention. He began his survey at the police surveillance booth on Schupstraat, one of the key access points to the district. Inside the booth, 2 officers sat behind bulletproof glass, vigilantly monitoring the area. The district's 3 central blocks were saturated with video cameras, their lenses covering every inch of street and sky. The booth also housed the controls for retractable steel bollards, designed to block vehicular access and fortify the district against any potential threats. As Notarbartolo walked by, he casually activated his camera, capturing detailed images of the surveillance setup. Next, he turned his attention to the Diamond Center itself. Rising 14 stories high, the building was a fortress in every sense of the word. Its gray exterior was imposing, and its security measures were meticulously planned. At the main entrance, a private security team operated a central control hub. Access was tightly controlled by metal turnstiles, and visitors were subjected to questioning by vigilant guards. Notarbartolo, however, was no ordinary visitor. Flashing his tenant ID card, he moved through the barriers effortlessly, blending in as just another legitimate businessman. As he walked, his camera continued its silent work, capturing crystal-clear images of the building's interior and its security features. Every turn of the lens added another piece to the puzzle he was assembling. What had started as a simple assignment for easy money was quickly evolving into something far more intriguing. Notarbartolo was no stranger to high-stakes operations, but this job was unlike anything he had encountered before. With each photograph he took, he edged closer to answering the dealer's question, a question that would set the stage for one of the most audacious robberies in modern history. Descending into the heart of the Antwerp Diamond Center felt like stepping into a fortress built to defy human ingenuity. Leonardo Notarbartolo rode the elevator down 2 levels, arriving in a confined, almost oppressive space, the antechamber of the vault. The walls were thick, the air heavy with silence, and at the far end of the room loomed the centerpiece of the building's security, a massive steel door weighing 3 tons. This was no ordinary door, it was a marvel of engineering, fortified with 6 layers of impenetrable defense. The primary barrier was the combination lock. The wheel, marked with numbers ranging from 0 to 99, required 4 precise digits to align correctly. The correct combination, invisible to the naked eye, could be discerned only through a small lens embedded atop the mechanism. With 100 million possible combinations, guessing the correct one was a near impossible feat. Even if someone could figure out the code, brute force was out of the question. The door was designed to resist 12 continuous hours of drilling, and any such attempt would immediately activate a seismic alarm embedded within the structure. Further complicating matters was the magnetic security field created by 2 metal plates, one mounted on the door and the other on the adjacent wall. When the system was armed, the plates formed an unbroken field. If the door moved and the field broke, an alarm would sound instantly. To disarm this layer, an additional code had to be entered into a nearby keypad. And then there was the key, a massive, nearly foot-long object so intricately designed that duplicating it would be virtually impossible. During business hours, the vault door stood open, protected only by a steel grate. It wasn't an invitation, however. Anyone foolish enough to consider breaking in during the day would have to contend with guards, surveillance, and the near certainty of being trapped. For Notarbartolo, any attempt would have to occur under the cover of night. That was when the guards locked the vault, sealed the entrances with steel roll gates, and vacated the building entirely, relying on the vault's advanced defenses to stand watch in their absence. Between midnight and morning, the building became eerily silent, its formidable technology acting as the sole protector of the treasures within. On this particular day, Notarbartolo approached the steel grate and pressed the buzzer. Upstairs, a guard glanced at the live video feed, recognized him, and remotely unlocked the barrier. Stepping inside, Notarbartolo was immediately enveloped by the thick concrete walls of the vault. Every movement he made was monitored. Motion, heat, and light detectors silently scanned the room, and a security camera captured his every step, feeding the footage directly to the guard station, where it was recorded for future review. The vault itself was a labyrinth of steel and copper. The safe deposit boxes, each a fortress in its own right, required not just a physical key but also a combination to open. Each combination lock offered 17,576 possible variations, further complicating unauthorized access. Notarbartolo went through the routine of unlocking and relocking his own box, ensuring that his actions appeared ordinary. Then, he left, his mind racing. This vault was one of the most formidable challenges he had ever encountered. Back in the present, sitting across from me in the Belgian prison, Notarbartolo pauses for the first time in his rapid-fire recounting of events. The urgency in his voice is palpable. His time for daily visitors is strictly limited to 1 hour. "Do you have any questions so far?" he asks, leaning in slightly, his blue eyes fixed on mine. I take a moment, then respond. "You're telling me that this heist was orchestrated by an Antwerp diamond dealer?" A smile spreads across his face. "Bravo," he says, the word dripping with satisfaction. "What about your cousin?" I press. His smile vanishes instantly. Notarbartolo was born in Palermo, Sicily, a place where whispers of mafia ties are never far behind. His extended family had long been under scrutiny, and those suspicions reached a boiling point when Italian anti-mafia authorities arrested his cousin, Benedetto Capizzi. They claimed Capizzi was poised to become the next leader of the Sicilian mafia, the Capo dei Capi. After the Diamond Center heist, Italian investigators traveled to Belgium, questioning Notarbartolo about his cousin's possible involvement. Theories swirled that the robbery had been a mafia operation and that the tale of the Jewish diamond dealer was merely a smokescreen to divert attention. Notarbartolo scoffs at such claims. "My cousin had nothing to do with this," he says firmly. He leans back, his confidence returning. "I didn't even think the vault could be robbed," he admits. "It was impregnable. At least, that's what I believed, until the dealer went to extraordinary lengths to prove me wrong." The words hang in the air, a tantalizing suggestion that the story he is telling is both more elaborate and more audacious than anyone could have imagined. The Antwerp Diamond Center vault was a marvel of modern security, designed to be impenetrable and equipped with 10 layers of meticulously crafted defenses. The vault door alone was an engineering masterpiece, combining several overlapping systems to create an almost insurmountable barrier. The combination lock featured a wheel marked with numbers from 0 to 99, requiring a precise 4-digit code to be dialed correctly, with 100 million possible combinations ensuring the odds of guessing were astronomical. Accompanying the lock was a keyed mechanism, its design so intricate that duplicating the key was virtually impossible. Built into the door was a seismic sensor capable of detecting the faintest vibrations, making any drilling attempts not only difficult but immediately detectable. Further securing the entryway was a locked steel grate, adding another physical obstacle, and a magnetic sensor that created a field between 2 metal plates, one on the door and one on the adjacent wall, that would trigger an alarm if disturbed. To monitor all activity near the door, an external security camera provided constant surveillance. Beyond the door, the vault itself was a fortress within a fortress. A keypad was required to deactivate the magnetic and seismic sensors, and a light sensor would sound an alarm if any unauthorized illumination was detected. Inside, an internal security camera recorded all movements, while a heat and motion sensor ensured that no unauthorized presence could go unnoticed. The safe deposit boxes, made from steel and copper, added yet another layer of security, requiring both a physical key and a combination, with 17,576 potential variations for each box. When Leonardo Notarbartolo first examined the vault, he concluded that breaching it was a task beyond the realm of possibility. He had documented its complexities in photographs taken with his hidden camera and presented them to the diamond dealer who had initially proposed the heist. Convinced that the evidence spoke for itself, Notarbartolo dismissed the idea as impractical. For months, he heard nothing further and assumed the matter was closed. Then, 5 months later, the dealer contacted him unexpectedly and requested a meeting at an address outside Antwerp. When Notarbartolo arrived at the location, he found the dealer waiting for him outside a derelict warehouse. Without much explanation, the dealer unlocked the door and gestured for him to follow. "I want you to meet some people," he said as they stepped inside. The interior of the warehouse was cavernous, its dim lighting barely illuminating a massive structure concealed beneath black plastic tarps. The dealer pulled back one corner of the tarp, revealing what lay beneath, and Notarbartolo froze in disbelief. Before him was an exact replica of the vault antechamber from the Antwerp Diamond Center. The walls, the floor, and even the imposing steel door had been recreated with painstaking accuracy. The detail was so precise that it was almost surreal. Notarbartolo felt as though he had stepped into a scene from a high-budget film. As he examined the replica, he noticed 3 men inside the mock vault engaged in quiet conversation. They stopped talking when they saw the dealer and Notarbartolo enter. The dealer began introducing them, though Notarbartolo, even years later, refused to reveal their real names, referring to them only by the nicknames they used within the group. The first was the genius, an expert in alarm systems whose reputation preceded him. The dealer assured Notarbartolo that the genius could disable even the most advanced security measures. Still skeptical, Notarbartolo gestured toward the replica vault and asked, "Can you disable this?" The genius smiled, his confidence unwavering. "Most of it," he replied, "but there are 1 or 2 things you'll need to handle yourself." The second man, tall and powerfully built, was known as the Monster. His nickname was more than just a nod to his size, it reflected his formidable skill set. The Monster was an unparalleled lockpicker, an electrician, a mechanic, and a driver. His physical strength was legendary, and his sheer presence commanded both respect and fear. Even within this group of specialists, the Monster's abilities made him stand out as someone who could tackle the toughest challenges with ease. The introduction solidified the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just an idea anymore, it was a carefully orchestrated operation in the making. The level of preparation, the resources, and the caliber of expertise assembled by the dealer suggested that the impossible might just become possible. Notarbartolo realized he was standing at the threshold of either the greatest heist in history or an extraordinary gamble destined for failure. The King of Keys was unlike the others in the crew. He had an air of quiet confidence and an appearance that seemed out of place in their high-stakes world. With his gray hair, weathered face, and calm demeanor, he looked more like a kindly grandfather than one of the most skilled key forgers alive. Yet his reputation was formidable, and the diamond dealer vouched for his unparalleled expertise. The King of Keys would be tasked with one of the heist's most critical components, duplicating the foot-long vault key, a task considered nearly impossible. "Just get me a clear video of the key," he instructed Leonardo Notarbartolo. "Leave the rest to me." Notarbartolo, never one to shy away from challenges, still hesitated. "That's easier said than done," he replied. The King of Keys simply shrugged. Whether it was easy or not was of no concern to him. His job would begin only once he had what he needed. "Don't worry about it," said the genius, stepping in to reassure Notarbartolo. "I'll make sure it happens." By September 2002, the plan to capture the key was already in motion. Early one morning, precisely at 7 a.m., a guard approached the vault door and began spinning its combination wheel. Above his head, hidden in the glare of a recessed ceiling light, a tiny video camera recorded his every move. The camera, no larger than a fingertip, had been expertly placed to ensure a clear view of the dial as the guard worked. Each number the wheel landed on was captured in sharp detail. The device wasn't just a camera. A small antenna broadcast its signal to a concealed receiver. That receiver was hidden in plain sight, encased within an ordinary-looking red fire extinguisher mounted on a wall in a nearby storage room. Though fully functional as a fire extinguisher, it contained a watertight compartment housing sophisticated electronics that recorded the transmitted footage. When the guard finished inputting the combination, he inserted the vault's massive key. For a brief moment, the camera recorded a perfect image of the key's intricate design before it disappeared into the lock. With a turn of the handle, the heavy steel door creaked open, granting access to the vault. The footage captured that day would prove vital to the King of Keys' work. By Thursday, February 13, 2003, just 2 days before the heist, the Diamond District was alive with activity. Overhead, the rhythmic thud of helicopter blades filled the air as a police convoy escorted an armored truck through Antwerp's bustling streets. Inside the truck was a shipment of raw diamonds from De Beers, the world's largest diamond mining company. Worth millions, the monthly delivery arrived in Antwerp like clockwork, ensuring the district remained flush with goods. The convoy passed posters advertising Venus Williams in town to compete in the Proximus Diamond Games tennis tournament as armed officers formed a protective perimeter around the truck. The gems were carried into the district through an unassuming door, adding to the trove of treasures that would soon be locked away in the vault. The following day, Friday, February 14th, Leonardo Notarbartolo entered the vault alone. In his jacket pocket was a can of women's hairspray. It was a simple yet ingenious tool for temporarily disabling one of the vault's key defenses, the combined heat and motion sensor. As he walked to his safe deposit box, the security camera recorded his every move, though the guard on duty had grown accustomed to the Italian's frequent visits and paid little attention. Notarbartolo carefully pulled out the aerosol can, moving with the precision of someone who had rehearsed the act many times. In one swift, practiced motion, he sprayed a fine, transparent mist over the sensor. The air filled with the faint, sweet scent of women's hairspray. The oily film acted as a temporary insulator, preventing the sensor from detecting fluctuations in temperature. Because the alarm required both heat and motion to trigger, the mist effectively rendered it inert, but only for a short time. The hack was risky. The exact duration of its effectiveness was unknown. Once the monster entered the vault during the heist, he would have to work quickly to bypass the sensor before his body heat penetrated the film. They estimated he might have as much as 5 minutes, or as little as 1. As Notarbartolo finished his task and left the vault, Venus Williams dominated her semifinal match at the Diamond Games. The city's diamantaires, many of whom were avid tennis fans, watched as she crushed her Slovakian opponent, inching closer to the tournament's prize, a tennis racket encrusted with nearly $1 million worth of diamonds. The event was a reminder of Antwerp's global dominance in the diamond trade, a glittering testament to the very industry that would soon be shaken by the heist of the century. Across Antwerp, the Diamond District lay silent, its bustling streets now deserted in the early hours of the morning. Leonardo Notarbartolo guided his rented gray Peugeot 307 through the city, past the central train station coated in decades of soot and grime, before turning onto Pelikanstraat. This narrow road bordered the heart of the district, its quiet juxtaposing the high-stakes operation about to unfold. He parked at the curb, his nerves calm but his focus sharp. From the car emerged the monster, the genius, the King of Keys, and Speedy, each carrying a large duffel bag packed with tools and equipment. The King of Keys approached the door of an unremarkable, run-down office building and quickly picked the lock. Within moments, the group disappeared inside, leaving no sign of their entry. The clock had just ticked past midnight. Inside, the genius led them through the back of the building into a secluded garden that bordered the rear of the Diamond Center. This spot was one of the few in the heavily surveilled district untouched by security cameras, making it an ideal entry point. Hidden there in advance was a ladder, carefully stashed by the genius during earlier preparations. Retrieving it, he climbed to a small terrace on the building's second floor. The terrace, however, wasn't without its defenses. A heat-sensing infrared detector guarded the space, capable of identifying any unauthorized movement by detecting body heat. But the genius came prepared. He carried a homemade polyester shield, a simple yet effective tool engineered for its low thermal conductivity. With deliberate precision, he approached the sensor, using the shield to block his body heat from reaching it. Once the shield was positioned in front of the detector, the terrace was rendered safe, its defenses temporarily neutralized. One by one, the rest of the team followed, scaling the ladder and stepping onto the now secure balcony. The genius then moved to the next obstacle, an alarm sensor on one of the terrace windows. With practiced ease, he disabled the device, clearing the way for the group to enter. They climbed through the window into a darkened stairwell, their movements swift but silent. From there, they descended to the vault antechamber, the cold, shadowy space that led to the vault itself. The team moved with precision. Black plastic bags were pulled from their gear and placed over the security cameras, blinding the watchful eyes that otherwise monitored the space. The genius flipped on the lights, illuminating the antechamber for the first time that night. Before them loomed the vault door, massive and foreboding, its intricate layers of security standing between them and their prize. Yet, as they stood there, the building remained eerily quiet. No alarms had been triggered, no signs of detection. Even months later, investigators would be baffled by how the group had bypassed the building's perimeter defenses. The genius reached into his bag and pulled out a custom-made slab of rigid aluminum. On one side, he affixed heavy-duty double-sided tape. This ingenious tool was designed specifically to manipulate the magnetic plates regulating the vault's security field. Carefully, he pressed the aluminum slab against the plates, ensuring they remained in perfect alignment. Once secured, he unscrewed the bolts holding the plates in place. The magnetic field stayed intact, undisturbed by the movement, as the plates were lifted and taped to the antechamber wall. By relocating the plates without disrupting the field, the genius had effectively neutralized this critical layer of security, a feat that would later leave authorities astonished. Next, the King of Keys acted on an observation from Notarbartolo's reconnaissance footage. The vault guard frequently stopped by a utility room before opening the vault. Investigating the room, the thieves discovered an astonishing oversight. The original vault key was hanging inside, left unsecured. The King of Keys seized the opportunity, pocketing the original key and ensuring no evidence of its duplication would ever reach the vault's manufacturers. Returning to the antechamber, the King of Keys inserted the original key into the lock while the genius dialed in the combination they had extracted from surveillance footage. Once the combination was set, the monster flipped off the lights. They couldn't risk activating the vault's light sensor when the door opened. In the darkness, the King of Keys turned the key, then spun the vault's four-pronged handle. The heavy bolts retracted with a deep, mechanical thud, and the massive door creaked open. Speedy immediately darted up the stairwell. His job was to maintain communication with Notarbartolo, who was waiting in the parked Peugeot. Deep underground, cell reception was non-existent, forcing Speedy to ascend for a signal. Reaching a clear spot, he dialed his friend. "We're in," he said simply before hanging up. Notarbartolo, sitting in the car with a view of the Diamond Center's front entrance a block and a half away, acknowledged the message. He set his phone down on the dashboard, sipping cold coffee as he monitored the quiet police scanner. The operation was progressing perfectly. Meanwhile, back in the antechamber, the King of Keys tackled the next barrier, the steel grate protecting the vault. With practiced efficiency, he picked the lock. Once open, the monster secured the grate with 2 cans of paint he found in a nearby storeroom, ensuring it wouldn't accidentally close. As with everything, they left no trace of themselves. Each member wore plastic gloves, and the police would later find no fingerprints on the cans or anywhere else. Now came the critical phase. The monster stepped into the darkness of the vault, the only sound his controlled breathing and the faint rustling of his gloves. Time was against him. The thin layer of hairspray on the heat and motion sensor was already breaking down, and his body heat would soon trigger the alarm if he lingered too long. Moving with a balance of speed and precision, he began his work, acutely aware that any hesitation could cost them the entire operation. The monster moved with deliberate precision, his every action rehearsed to perfection in the replica vault. He methodically bypassed the security system's core wiring, isolating its inbound and outbound circuits, and rendered the light sensor completely useless by covering it with tape. This was no improvised job, it was a calculated strike against the most advanced security measures. As he had done countless times in practice, he counted exactly 11 steps into the center of the room. Reaching up to the ceiling, he carefully pushed back a panel, exposing the hidden security wires. These cables carried a continuous electric pulse, an unbroken circuit designed to detect any anomaly. The system operated on a binary logic. The pulse entered the room and waited for an immediate return signal. If anything interrupted this delicate exchange, the alarm would sound instantly. The monster's hands, steady despite the stakes, moved to strip the plastic insulation from the wires. It was a task that demanded unwavering focus. A single slip could sever the wires entirely, breaking the circuit and triggering the system. Later, when the police discovered the exposed wiring, they speculated that the thieves might have panicked and abandoned an attempt to cut the lines. But Notarbartolo would later insist that the monster had executed the task flawlessly. He had never intended to sever the wires. Instead, he connected a pre-cut bypass wire, clipping it between the inbound and outbound cables. This clever maneuver created a direct bridge, rerouting the electric pulse and completing the circuit before it reached the sensors. With this diversion in place, the system was effectively neutralized. No matter what the sensors detected or failed to detect, the signal would remain uninterrupted. The vault was now safe for the rest of the team to enter. Even with the system disabled, the team proceeded with caution. They took no chances. The heat and motion detectors were neutralized with a styrofoam box, and additional light sensors were covered with tape. Only then did the real work begin. The King of Keys retrieved a homemade hand-cranked drill from his bag. This tool, crude in appearance but highly effective, featured a thin metal shaft designed for precision work. He inserted the shaft into one of the safe deposit box locks and began cranking. The lock gave way after about 3 minutes, snapping open with a satisfying click. From that point, the operation moved like clockwork. Each man had memorized the layout of the vault during their rehearsals in the replica, allowing them to navigate the space in near total darkness. Flashlights flickered for mere seconds, just enough to position the drill over the next target. One box after another yielded its treasures as they worked swiftly and methodically. In those brief flashes of light, the magnitude of their haul began to take shape. Duffel bags overflowed with gold bars, wads of cash in various currencies, Israeli, Swiss, American, European, and British, and leather satchels filled with rough and polished diamonds. It was a breathtaking fortune, but there was no time to celebrate or inspect their spoils. The clock was against them, and they knew they had to move quickly. By 5:30 a.m., they had opened an astounding 109 boxes. The vault's eerie silence was broken only by the faint sounds of their work, and though excitement simmered beneath the surface, they remained disciplined. Time was running out. The city would soon awaken, and the streets outside would fill with activity. It was time to leave. Speedy relayed the message to Notarbartolo, who waited outside in the rented Peugeot. Over the phone, Speedy's voice was terse but calm. "We're coming out." The extraction process was as meticulous as their entry. It took nearly an hour for the team to haul the heavy duffel bags up the stairs, navigate past the now-disabled infrared sensors, and lower their loot down the ladder into the private garden. From there, they moved through the decrepit office building, each step a calculated part of their escape. Notarbartolo remained in the car, engine idling, his eyes scanning the street as he clutched his phone. The quiet of the early morning was interrupted only briefly by the passing of a bus. As it disappeared into the distance, the street fell silent once more. Now, Notarbartolo hissed into the phone, his voice sharp with urgency. In the dim, pre-dawn light, the four thieves emerged from the building at a run, their movements swift and deliberate. They crammed the duffel bags into the Peugeot's trunk and back seat, the weight of their haul straining the vehicle's suspension. Without a word, they slammed the doors shut and split up, heading off on foot toward Notarbartolo's nearby apartment. Notarbartolo, alone in the car now, took a deep breath. He put the car into gear, carefully pulling away from the curb at a measured pace. Behind him, the Diamond District began to stir, its residents blissfully unaware of the historic heist that had just unfolded beneath their feet. Within 30 minutes, the thieves were crowded around the duffel bags in Notarbartolo's small apartment. Tension mixed with anticipation as the monster knelt to unzip the first bag. He pulled out a leather satchel, a symbol of the wealth they had risked everything to steal. This moment was supposed to be triumphant, the culmination of years of planning and precision. With a confident tug, he opened the satchel. His expression shifted from excitement to confusion. It was empty. Frowning, he reached for another. The second satchel, too, was empty. A heavy silence filled the room as anxiety replaced the exhilaration that had fueled them through the night. Panic crept in as they frantically unzipped bag after bag, opening each satchel with growing urgency. Time after time, they found nothing. The diamonds that should have been there, worth a fortune, their ultimate prize, were inexplicably missing. Notarbartolo's voice broke the tense quiet. "We've been set up," he muttered, the words landing heavily in the room. His mind raced as he stepped into the shower, letting scalding hot water pound against his skin. Fatigue clouded his thoughts, but clarity was now a necessity. He replayed the events leading up to the heist, searching for answers. He vividly recalled seeing the satchels during his reconnaissance missions in the offices of Antwerp's diamantaires. Back then, they had been brimming with inventory. The haul was supposed to exceed $100 million. Now, it seemed they had only managed to grab a fraction of that, perhaps $20 million at most. As the steam filled the bathroom, a troubling realization began to take shape in Notarbartolo's mind. The diamond dealer who had initiated the plan might not have been acting alone. What if he had tipped off other merchants in the district? If the dealers had known about the heist, they could have quietly emptied their safe deposit boxes in advance, securing their inventory in private safes at their offices. After the heist, they could simply file insurance claims, pretending their diamonds were stolen, while secretly keeping the gems. It was a perfect scam, one that would leave Notarbartolo and his crew as the unwitting pawns. As this possibility crystallized, a wave of anger and disillusionment washed over him. The heist he had meticulously orchestrated might not have been the brilliant coup he had envisioned, but rather a piece of someone else's larger scheme. The water cascaded over him as he realized how thoroughly they had been played. Just a half hour ago, he had felt like a king. Now, he was nothing more than a pawn. When he finally stepped out of the shower, his mood was grim. Speedy and Notarbartolo hit the road not long after, driving the rented Peugeot 307 along the E19 highway, heading south out of Antwerp. The city's lights faded into the distance as they settled in for the long drive back to Turin. In the back seat sat a garbage bag stuffed with incriminating evidence, receipts, tools, and remnants of the crime. Notarbartolo planned to stop in France to burn it, ensuring no trace of their operation remained. But Speedy was unraveling. His face was pale, and his eyes darted nervously at the other cars on the road. 20 minutes into the drive, his composure broke entirely. "I can't do this," Speedy blurted, his voice shaky and panicked. Notarbartolo glanced at him, irritated but calm. "Take it easy," he said, trying to soothe his friend. "If you're losing it, I'll drop you at the train station in Brussels. You don't have to come the whole way." But Speedy wasn't listening. "We can't bring that bag into Brussels," he stammered. "The cops are everywhere. They'll be looking for us. We can't risk it." Notarbartolo sighed, frustration creeping into his voice. This is a ridiculous time to have a panic attack. Pull over, Speedy snapped, his voice rising in desperation. Reluctantly, Notar Bartolo took the exit and surveyed the darkened surroundings. They were in a rural area, far from any prying eyes. "There's a dirt road," Speedy said, pointing toward the shadowy outline of a forest. "That's perfect." Notar Bartolo turned onto the narrow path, the car's headlights cutting through the dense trees. The forest was silent, save for the faint rustling of leaves. He stopped the car, his patience wearing thin, and the two men got out with the garbage bag. Meanwhile, not far from this very forest, a 59-year-old retired Belgian grocer named August Van Camp was indulging in one of his favorite pastimes. A man of simple pleasures, Van Camp adored his pet weasels, Mickey and Minnie. On most mornings, he brought them to the woods, releasing them into rabbit holes to flush out their prey. Watching the rabbits bolt from their burrows, startled and frantic, always brought him a quiet kind of joy. That morning, however, he would stumble upon something far more unusual than a rabbit, and it would change the course of the heist forever. In 1998, August Van Camp decided to purchase a slender stretch of forest alongside the E19 motorway, just a short 5-minute drive from his home. To most people, the property might not have seemed particularly special. It was narrow and constantly subjected to the hum of vehicles rushing by at 80 miles an hour. But for Van Camp, it was a peaceful retreat, 12 acres of picturesque woodland with a bubbling stream cutting through the trees. The area was also a haven for rabbits, whose burrows dotted the forest floor, making it the perfect place for Van Camp's favorite pastime, sending his pet weasels, Mickey and Minnie, into the burrows to flush out their furry prey. Despite its charm, the proximity to the motorway meant that Van Camp's idyllic slice of nature was often marred by human neglect. Garbage regularly found its way onto the property, thrown from passing cars or dumped by careless visitors. The local teenagers once took their antics to another level by hosting a rowdy party in the forest, which ended with them burning down a small hut Van Camp had painstakingly built. The destruction left him furious, his indignation simmering long after the ashes cooled. Whenever Van Camp discovered trash on his land, he was quick to call the police, insisting they take action against what he saw as a growing problem. Over time, the authorities became all too familiar with his complaints, which followed a predictable script. "The kids have dumped trash on my property again," Van Camp would grumble over the phone. "We're sorry to hear that, Mr. Van Camp," the officer on the other end would respond with a weary politeness. "I demand that you send someone to investigate." Van Camp would insist, his voice rising with frustration. "We'll pass your concerns along," came the standard reply. Van Camp rarely heard back, and the trash kept piling up. Each new discovery only deepened his sense of injustice and his resolve to hold someone, anyone, accountable. On the morning of Monday, February 17th, Van Camp set out on one of his usual outings with Mickey and Minnie. As he walked through the forest, he stumbled upon yet another unsightly heap of garbage hidden among the underbrush. The sight stopped him in his tracks, and his irritation flared into a full-blown fit of exasperation. Puffing out his cheeks and throwing his arms in the air, he muttered aloud, questioning what the world was coming to and why people couldn't respect his land. Determined to document the mess for his next call to the police, Van Camp knelt down to examine the discarded items. His sharp eyes scanned the debris, taking in the details. There was a tangled mess of videotape strewn haphazardly across the ground, catching the sunlight in a way that only added to his annoyance. Nearby, a wine bottle sat perched at an awkward angle, its contents long gone. A half-eaten salami sandwich lay discarded beside it, its edges nibbled at by wildlife. But what truly caught Van Camp's attention were the white envelopes scattered amid the mess. The words Diamond Center, Antwerp were printed clearly on their surfaces. Van Camp's irritation turned into something sharper, more focused. These weren't the usual remnants of careless teenagers or passing motorists. The envelopes, bearing the name of one of Antwerp's most secure institutions, seemed glaringly out of place in his quiet forest. A nagging curiosity crept in alongside his anger, pushing him to take a closer look. Little did Van Camp know, The pile of trash at his feet would become a critical piece of evidence, tying one of the century's most audacious heists to a group of thieves who thought they had left no trace. "Kids," Van Camp muttered under his breath, his frustration evident as he surveyed the mess left behind in his forest. When he returned home, he picked up the phone and dialed the local police. This wasn't the first time he had called to complain about the trash on his property, but today, he felt particularly determined to make them listen. As he recounted the litter strewn across his land, videotape, wine bottles, envelopes, and half-eaten food, he mentioned the words printed on the discarded envelopes. "Diamond Center envelopes," he said, almost as an afterthought. The officer on the other end suddenly perked up. "What did you say?" they asked sharply. Van Camp hesitated, surprised by the shift in tone. "Antwerp Diamond Center envelopes," he repeated. This time, the response was immediate. Within hours, a team of detectives descended on Van Camp's forest. They meticulously combed through the underbrush, gathering every scrap of garbage and even picking up loose gems that glinted in the sunlight. Van Camp stood to the side, watching with a mix of satisfaction and vindication. For once, the authorities were taking his complaints seriously. By mid-afternoon, the collected trash had been transported to the evidence room at the Diamond Squad's headquarters in Antwerp. The detectives began sifting through the plastic bags, looking for anything that might provide a lead. A pile of torn paper caught one investigator's attention. Carefully, the fragments were pieced back together, revealing an invoice for a low-light video surveillance system. The name on the document was unmistakable: Leonardo Notarbartolo. Meanwhile, back at Van Camp's property, another detective crouched low to the ground, his eyes scanning the dirt and brambles for overlooked clues. His gaze landed on a small, jagged piece of paper half buried in the mud. He gently lifted it, brushing off the debris. Held up to the light, it revealed itself to be a business card. Printed on it were the name and contact details of Elio Denorio, an Italian electronics expert with a long history of involvement in robberies. Although Notarbartolo had consistently refused to identify his accomplices, mounting evidence pointed to Denorio being none other than the genius. Among the debris was another seemingly insignificant item, a half-eaten salami sandwich. Nearby, investigators found the packaging for Antipasto Italiano salami. Both were carefully bagged and sent to the Diamond Squad for further analysis. 4 days later, armed with this mounting evidence, detectives executed a search warrant at the Antwerp apartment rented by Notarbartolo. Inside, they discovered a receipt tucked away in a cupboard. It was from a local grocery store and bore a timestamp matching the day of the heist preparations. The item purchased? Antipasto Italiano salami. One detective drove to the grocery store and asked the manager to review the surveillance footage from 12:56 p.m. on Thursday, February 13th, just 2 days before the heist. The grainy video came into focus, showing a tall, muscular Italian man at the counter, purchasing salami. His identity was unmistakable: Ferdinando Finato, the man presumed to be the monster. Meanwhile, far from Antwerp, the team of thieves had reconvened at a small bar in Adro, Italy, about 50 miles northeast of Milan. It was now Monday, roughly 36 hours after the heist. They had arranged to meet the diamond dealer there to divide their spoils. The plan was simple: the dealer would take 1/3 of the loot for financing and assembling the team, and the remaining share would be split among the thieves. Each man had anticipated a payout in the tens of millions, a life-changing fortune. Instead, the haul had turned out to be far less than expected, leaving them with around $3 million each. While still a considerable sum, it fell far short of their expectations. As they sat in the dimly lit bar, sipping espressos that eventually gave way to beers, frustration simmered among the group. They couldn't shake the feeling that they had been duped. Questions swirled about the dealer's role in the diminished payout. Had he orchestrated a larger scheme? Had he double-crossed them? Hour after hour, they waited for answers, but the dealer never arrived. By closing time, Notarbartolo's unease had turned into outright suspicion. He couldn't stop replaying the events in the forest. His decision to drop off Speedy at the train station and move on without destroying the incriminating evidence now felt like a glaring mistake. Worse still, Speedy's erratic behavior and panic had jeopardized everything. Notarbartolo, who had vouched for his friend, was left feeling humiliated by Speedy's breakdown. As the bar staff began stacking chairs and shutting off lights, the reality set in. The dealer wasn't coming, and the answers they desperately sought would remain out of reach. The team dispersed into the night, burdened by the weight of their questions and the bitter realization that their flawless heist might have been little more than a pawn in someone else's game. On Thursday evening, Leonardo Notarbartolo sat down for dinner with his family at their home near Turin, trying his best to maintain the illusion of normalcy. His 3-year-old granddaughter played with his cell phone, giggling as she tapped away at the screen. Her laughter was infectious, and for a fleeting moment, Leonardo's mounting concerns faded into the background. He laughed along with her, savoring the rare respite from his growing unease. Despite the warmth of the evening, his mind was preoccupied with a pressing issue: the rental car. It was due back in Antwerp the following day, and the original plan required him to return it in person. This wasn't just about the car; his return would help cover his tracks. By showing his face at the Diamond Center, he could avoid suspicion. If the police were looking for tenants who had suddenly disappeared, he wouldn't be on that list. The trip would also allow him to clean his Antwerp apartment more thoroughly, eliminating any potential evidence. That night, he informed his family of his plan to leave early the next morning. His wife, feeling neglected after weeks of his absences, decided to join him. She saw the trip as an opportunity to spend some time together, and they even agreed to meet friends from the Netherlands for a dinner party while in Belgium. The following morning, as the Notarbartolos sped through the Swiss Alps en route to Antwerp, events back home took a dramatic turn. Acting on evidence recovered from Van Camp's forest, including the invoice for the surveillance system, the Belgian detectives had enlisted the help of the Italian police. A team of officers surrounded the family home, preparing to execute a search warrant. Inside, Notarbartolo's 24-year-old son, Marco, refused to open the door. Panicked, he repeatedly dialed his father's cell phone as the police began smashing their way inside. Unbeknownst to Marco, his father's phone sat silently in Leonardo's jacket pocket. The night before, while playing with the device, Leonardo's granddaughter had accidentally turned off the ringer. Marco, desperate for a response, tried calling his mother's phone as well, but it was switched off. Again and again, he called his father's number, only to hear it ring endlessly with no answer. Meanwhile, oblivious to the chaos unfolding back home, Notarbartolo pressed on toward Antwerp, focused on completing his tasks. Back in Belgium, detectives Pays and De Brueker were deep into their investigation, frustrated by the lack of leads. The thieves could have vanished into thin air, fleeing to far-off places like Brazil, Thailand, or Russia. The idea that one of the perpetrators might return to the Diamond District never crossed their minds. Yet that was precisely what Leonardo did. Upon arriving in Antwerp, he made his way to the Diamond Center, where a friend from the Netherlands waited discreetly on the street. With practiced ease, Notarbartolo waved at the security guard and entered the building, casually collecting his mail as though it were any ordinary day. What he didn't know was that the security guard, aware of the ongoing police investigation, had already alerted the building manager. Within minutes, the manager contacted the detectives, who rushed to the scene. When they arrived, they found Notarbartolo chatting casually with the manager. Feigning confusion, he claimed not to understand their French questions fully and acted as though he couldn't remember the exact address of his own apartment, insisting he only knew the way by foot. "Fine," Pays said, steering him toward a waiting police car. "Let's go, then." Eventually, Leonardo reluctantly directed them to the correct building. As the car pulled to a stop outside the apartment, they spotted his wife and the friends who had joined them for dinner emerging from the front entrance. They were loaded down with bags, and one carried a rolled-up carpet. It was a narrow escape. Had the police arrived just a minute later, the group would have vanished, taking with them whatever they had hastily packed. The timing was uncanny, and the moment bristled with tension. What had started as a bold attempt to cover his tracks was unraveling rapidly, leaving Notarbartolo facing the very confrontation he had hoped to avoid. The arrests were swift and decisive. The police detained everyone present, immediately examining the contents of the bags, which contained critical evidence that began to unravel the layers of the elaborate heist. Among the items recovered were several prepaid SIM cards. These cards, linked to phones used during the heist, revealed a clear pattern. They connected to three individuals: Elio Denorio, also known as the Genius, Ferdinando Finato, dubbed the Monster, and a jittery, paranoid associate of Notarbartolo's named Pietro Tivano, likely the man referred to as Speedy. Cell tower records from the night of the heist painted an incriminating picture. All three of these men, along with Notarbartolo, had been in the Diamond District during the robbery. Throughout the operation, Tivano's phone was in constant contact with Notarbartolo's, further cementing his involvement. The same day that Notarbartolo was taken into custody, Italian police searched his home in Turin. Hidden within a safe, they discovered 17 polished diamonds, each accompanied by certificates. Belgian detectives traced these certificates directly back to the Antwerp vault, providing irrefutable evidence of his connection to the crime. The discoveries didn't stop there. More diamonds were found hidden in a rolled-up carpet retrieved from Notarbartolo's Antwerp apartment, adding to the mounting evidence against him. The Belgian courts wasted no time in delivering a harsh verdict. Notarbartolo was convicted of masterminding the audacious heist and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Armed with a combination of cell phone records and even the seemingly trivial evidence of a salami sandwich, Belgian detectives persuaded French authorities to raid the home of Finato's girlfriend on the French Riviera. The raid uncovered marked $100 bills that were traced back to one of the Diamond Center's victims. Although legal proceedings dragged on for years, Finato was eventually arrested in Italy in November 2007. He is now serving a 5-year sentence for his role in the crime. As for Elio Denorio, the man suspected of being the Genius, his involvement was harder to deny despite his initial claims of innocence. Questioned by Italian police, he admitted to installing security cameras in Notarbartolo's office but denied any direct involvement in the heist. However, forensic evidence told a different story. His DNA was discovered on adhesive tape left inside the vault. This discovery led to his extradition to Belgium in November 2007, where he began serving a 5-year prison sentence. Tivano, true to his nervous and erratic nature, refused to cooperate during his trial. The heist-run accomplice was convicted in Italy and is now serving a 5-year sentence as well. His lawyer has made no statements on his behalf, and Tivano himself remains silent, unwilling to reveal any details of the heist. One of the most enduring mysteries involves a fifth member of the team. While cell phone records and DNA traces confirm the presence of another individual, their identity has never been uncovered. Similarly, the King of Keys, whose expertise was critical to bypassing the vault's defenses, has managed to elude capture entirely. Years later, on January 4, 2009, I sat with Notarbartolo for what would be our final meeting. Over the course of 14 weeks, we had spoken 7 times in the prison's visiting room, yet the central mysteries of the heist remained unresolved. Was the estimated $100 million stolen, as authorities believed, or was it closer to the $20 million Notarbartolo claimed? Was his theory about an elaborate insurance scam orchestrated by diamond dealers plausible, or was it simply a convenient story to deflect attention? Could his cousin, a reputed mafia boss, have played a hidden role? And perhaps most tantalizing of all, where was the loot now? The murkiness of the diamond trade only deepened these questions. Detective Ajam de Bruiker explained that as much as 3/4 of the business operates under the table, making it difficult to verify the full extent of the heist. While legitimate insurance claims following the robbery totaled approximately $25 million, de Bruiker estimated that at least another $75 million in goods had been stolen, bringing the total to $100 million. If Notarbartolo's insurance scam theory is accurate, the scheme worked like this: dealers who were in on the plan removed their legitimate and illicit stock from the vault before the heist. They then filed claims for the legitimate goods, pocketing insurance payouts while secretly keeping their diamonds. This scenario, dubbed the double whammy by insurance adjuster Denise Oliver, suggests that the $20 million stolen by the thieves came from traders who were not part of the scam. Alternatively, there may have been no insurance scam at all. The thieves could have truly stolen $100 million, with Notarbartolo spinning a story to obscure the full scale of the crime. Regardless of which version is true, one fact is clear: millions of dollars in stolen diamonds remain unaccounted for. When asked about the fate of the loot, Notarbartolo offers little insight. He insists that such matters are best discussed after his release from prison, leaving the mystery tantalizingly unresolved. For now, the whereabouts of his share of the heist remain unknown. Perhaps it lies hidden somewhere in the serene foothills of the Italian Alps, waiting for the day when its rightful, or not so rightful, owner comes to claim it.